What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Style of Gaming. It's your boy B. Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to our full style review of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button if you enjoy the channel and its content. Please like and share this video if you enjoy the points, or you want to just share this with somebody to offer them a different take on this incredibly intricate game. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the full style review. Assassin's Creed Odyssey released on October 5th, 2018 for the PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox. For this review, I played about 55 hours of the game, completing the main campaign, and have gotten so close to sealing off Atlantis. I swear, I'm gonna do it. Taking place in the year 431 BCE, in the thrust of the Peloponnesian War, Odyssey remains in the distant past, but brings us closer to the common era than its predecessor Origin. We follow the story of Cassandra or Alexios, two warriors originating from Sparta that befall tragedy and pain before rising to greatness. The choice of Alexios or Cassandra as protagonist bears little impact on quests received or even skill tree, but slightly alters the campaign. We'll definitely get into how this changes in a moment, but we're gonna just continue our story synopsis for now. Spurred into the fray by a mysterious man named Elpenor, your characters seek to assassinate a Spartan general known as the Wolf of Sparta, which takes our story off of the opening and poor island of Kefalonia to Megaris. Upon rescuing and meeting the game's naval travel companion, Barnabas, we learn the identity of the Wolf being Cassandra and Alexios' father, Nicolaus of Sparta. When confronted, the Wolf sheds light on Alexios and Cassandra's past, stating that he is only the man who had raised them, but was not their true father. He elucidates their tragic rejection from Sparta, but also reveals that their mother, Midadine, may have escaped. You either spare or assassinate Nicolaus, but ultimately, this leads Alexios and Cassandra on a journey to find Midadine. Upon returning to Elpenor, we learn of his nefarious plot linked to the Cult of Cosmos, a multifaceted and interdisciplinary group of elites, mercenaries, slavers, and politicians seeking to influence the Greek world through the shadows, operating as a precursor to the Templar, known historically in the Assassin's Creed universe. Your choice in main protagonist has one major influence in the world of Odyssey. If you pick Cassandra, Alexios survives his tragic past, is raised by the cult, and becomes the monster and brute who acts as the sword of the cult named Deimos. The same if you pick Alexios, Cassandra will be the slayer. For my review, I played Cassandra. Learning of the cult's schemes, Cassandra takes off to secure Midadine as the cult is searching for her as a sacrifice. The search for Midadine takes the player all over the seas of the Aegea. From Attica to Naxos, we see and interact with great members of Greece's Democratic Party ranging from Socrates to Pericles. After a tragic loss and the death of Pericles, Cassandra and Midadine are reunited in a touching and moving cutscene that truly stands out from the game's narrative. From this point, however, the game seems to squander the emotional traction it had created. With Midadine secured, Cassandra set sail for Sparta to reclaim her and her mother's citizenship and her family home. This is a placeholder, though, for bringing justice to the cult-influenced Spartan homeland and to make amends for the night Alexio and Cassandra were scorned from Sparta. One major event that takes place before heading to Sparta is Midadine reveals the true father of our protagonist. They are not just mortals, but descendants of an ancient people. The characters are sent to a remote island to meet their true father. He is then revealed as Pythagoras and explains of his mysterious lineage and the precursor knowledge of the ancient people known as the Isu. He reveals to Cassandra the gateway to Atlantis, which he employs her to help cover up by slaying beasts of myth. After a long and drawn-out series of events, the corrupt king of Sparta is revealed, which he has prominently dealt with. By this point in the narrative, the writing seemed to get weaker, and the characters' motivations seem purely objective-based. It becomes a bounce around the map as we are captured in battle after encountering and fighting Deimos. We learn that one of the main heads of the cult is Cleon, a man who was stoking the flames of Athens' rebellion against Pericles. It was this relationship that led to Deimos assassinating Pericles in the Parthenon. In the end, he successfully killed Cleon and returned to Mount Targanais, or however you say it, I can't pronounce that one, with your mother where Deimos is waiting. The final boss battle is a repeat of the first time you encounter Deimos, which ends with him falling from the cliff at the hand of Cassandra's blade. This is, of course, happening simultaneously to the second iteration of the present-day narrative line of Layla Hassan, introduced in Assassin's Creed Origin. Layla, in the end of Origins, had accepted to work with the Assassins group after meeting William Miles. The present-day story continues to follow protagonist Layla, who now uses the Animus to connect with Alexios and Cassandra to discover the secrets of the Assassin's Order through their DNA and unique history, as to be expected from most Assassin's Creed. However, Cassandra and Alexios are the grandchildren of the late Leonidas I, the Spartan general who stood with 300 Spartans against the invading Persian forces of Xerxes in the Battle of Thermopylae. It is with the spear of Leonidas that serves as a vehicle for both narrative development, spurring flashbacks of Alexios and Cassandra, but also as a gameplay mechanic and a vehicle for stealth combat in the game. Its ultimate purpose, however, is used as a key to the Isu civilization and architecture left behind in the evolving Greek world, in the way that Layla and Cassandra sync to and from the Animus. With a brief synopsis, I want to share a little bit of my opinion on the verdict on this game, because that was the best that I could absolutely do at boiling down the plot to this game, because Odyssey has a storyline that comes in very strong, and it attempts to define its characters in this highly developed world. Cassandra and Alexios are well-rounded characters and are a welcome experience from the hardened attitude of Bayek from Origins, who seemed completely out of touch with the world he occupied. With that being said, it's worth noting that it is the exact fact that Cassandra and Alexios are empathetic, connected, passionate, that the story can oftentimes feel tonally confused. Between mismatched facial animations in emotional or grave scenarios, or a completely forced line for comedic relief, the game teeters between take me serious and this is kind of for pure enjoyment. The first half of the story takes serious precedent, in my opinion, learning of Nikolaos and then Elpenor's true intentions. It was not only intense, but it was cinematically catered and provided mystery and excitement for the player. I truly felt that the game began to fizzle after that, though, when we finally reached Midadine. It was just such a climax, and the story could have ended there. The cinematic was superb and conveyed a serious level of depth, and I was touched at their reunion. However, in classic Assassin's Creed fashion, it had to be broken up with a fight that ultimately dampened the warm moment. The game just became increasingly predictable from that moment on, and I felt the major reveals were not as important. That might be a pacing issue, though, in all honesty. The death of Pericles came right on the footsteps of the death of Phoebe. It was an emotional roller coaster for the player, and you didn't really know what to expect. However, there was no meaning or weight whatsoever to Brasidas' death. It made the interactions with him seem weightless. He was a placeholder until his head held the place of Deimos' spear. Brasidas, I didn't even bring him up in the synopsis because he's just kind of a random character that's used as a vehicle to get you from Naxos to Sparta. It seemed like he was going to be a very influential and important character, but then they just killed him off really quickly. He was posited as an influential support character to ultimately be a cheap emotional thrill near the conclusion of the main campaign. I think the biggest disappointment for me is the fact that sealing Atlantis and experiencing the myths isn't technically a part of the main story path. It is because it's deemed an Odyssey quest, but it's like in-game content. Think the Dreaming City in Destiny 2 Forsaken. Leaves a big hole in the narrative, in my opinion, it's just simply floating around now until I dedicate another 10 to 15 hours to achieve it. Which I will, but Cassandra's narrative has technically ended, and there is no direct resolution to what is happening for Layla. It makes me think that the actions in the present have little impact, even though it's being purported and presented as though it's a major turning point for the Assassins against the Templar. This is a story worth playing nonetheless, but similar to Origins, there is little assassin in the Assassin's Creed game. I like to view this new series arc the way Marvel recognizes the Netflix Marvel shows. It's extended universe that is allowed to use some of the major plot points, but it's not quite a Marvel Cinematic Universe experience. This is an Assassin's Creed extended universe story that borrows from the Assassin's lineage to make the story work, but doesn't ever get to or attempt to merge with the series as a whole. The story in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, as I said, is overall rather good, and it surprised me in a lot of ways when it worked. And I say that specifically when it worked, because there was a lot of points that it didn't, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad, it was just kind of quirky. Cassandra and Alexios, assuming that their writing and lines are almost identical, are properly developed characters that hold weight in the universe that they exist in. They have history and personal characteristics that players can relate to. One important distinction is that they aren't brick walls like Baek. Baek was just a violent malaka. His narrative arc left little to connect with or to really support his cause. With Cassandra and Alexios, they have emotion, and many of their reactions seem justified. They can interact with the world, be merciful or cruel, and even seem to be sarcastic in nature. They come from a more carnal time and can react with democracy or brutality. This duality is present throughout this game, and Ubisoft handles the heroic concept of glory very well in contrast with politics, laws, and doing what's expected of you. Violence can incite violence and is an accepted practice in this world, given the right circumstances and political support. I think that brings me to a major point with this title, and it is welcoming of the overarching RPG elements. This series has always danced around RPG practices and stylization, but I feel Odyssey truly commits to this new foundation and the direction presented in Origins. While sometimes goofy and the reaction isn't what you intended, the dialogue selection is a welcomed addition that helps keep players invested in the dialogue of the game, but also helps support the duality of player choices and the world theme. The choice-based dialogue options open up for a unique player experience and mild replayability. I say mild only because if you replay this whole game just to, make a few different choices, I applaud you, because the narrative stays relatively the same even if you choose some of the more dicey narrative options. The only reason I know this is because of unfortunate game crashes. I had to play certain sequences over again, chose different options, and the outcomes were almost identical. What I mean to say is your diplomatic actions could be quickly dismantled by your choices to complete an area, which means your choices have little substance across certain instances and are extremely permanent in others. Sometimes the writing seems a little flat as well. While adding quest after quest offers more time with the game, even some of the story quests feel like reskinned side quests, and the dialogue was pushed, addressing obvious plot points as to hold the player's hand through a pretty straightforward story. The characters often react in a hyperbolized manner when dealing with serious matters that sometimes disconnect the experience of the plot, but also while addressing the duality presented in Assassin's Creed, i.e. the Templar versus Assassins, good versus evil, now Sparta versus Athens, Odyssey offers very little to deepen that connection that has been an overarching theme in Assassin's Creed, but really only makes a nod to it by offering player choices and dialogue options. So overall, this was a great story set in the Assassin's Creed universe, having very little to do with assassinhood. Odyssey is a game that strikes me in so many ways, good and bad, and typically the good outweighs the bad when we're speaking about this game. Odyssey is easily one of the most sprawling and lifelike worlds ever rendered in gaming. From massive Greek structures like the Parthenon in Athens, to hidden and subtle prayer sites to specific gods nestled deep on remote islands, to hidden temples and caves underground, players can't say that there aren't things to do in this sometimes overwhelming environment. Greece is formulated by various islands. Some massive bodies like Arcadia allow for hours of travel on land. In addition, Ubisoft's attention to detail provides even some of the seemingly pointless islands for your adventuring pleasure. Can't tell you how many times I ended up on an island and was just like, what the hell am I doing here? Being disconnected by large bodies of the Aegean Sea, naval combat has made a passionate return to Odyssey in an excitingly new but nostalgic manner. We man the Hellenistic ship, the Adrestia, which functions similar to the ships in the prior series, but have a unique feel that makes the travel and combat feel fresh again. Personally, it brought a huge smile to my face to hear shanties again, this time sung in a Greek language. With this in consideration, exploring has never felt better in an Assassin's Creed game. With minor hiccups to hit detection when climbing, connection with the environment feels smooth and natural. even with the loss of the dedicated parkour button and the fact that you can jump from any height without damage. Now, just a side note, don't get me wrong, I like and I dislike this feature, no fall damage. It works in terms of a plot point, and it functions as the reason Alexios and Cassandra survived their fall. It's their Greek hero trait, but it's just so odd in an Assassin's Creed game to not even consider height. However, at the same time, the character is slowed down when climbing, and it makes seeming vertical mountains seem plausible, but as a personal statement, I loved how ludicrously fast you could climb things, and that you shouldn't have been able to in prior iterations. Considering you take no fall damage, I don't think realism was the key mechanism they were going for with traversal, so they could have just kept cat-like climbing, in my opinion. Just a personal opinion. However, Odyssey does reward players for every action they take, from discovering caves, liberating outposts, and finding treasure. This comes in the form of crafting material, drachmae, which is the money, experience, or gear that makes grinding a little worth it, because this game is definitely grindy. There are an incredible amount of tasks that will consume your playtime. One of the biggest changes in Origins brought to Odyssey is the dynamic side quest missions. There are a plethora of side missions that are unique and offer supplemental information and lore to the rich world. These quests shy away from the traditional methods of acquisition and can be unlocked by completing missions, bounties, or even talking with civilians you just saved from an outpost. The missions of old Assassin's Creed still exist, however. Run here, kill that person, follow this person, etc. But it's been overhauled and placed in the message board section, where they change daily, sometimes weekly. These missions are easy to complete and are often on the same island that you accessed them, where side quests expand the player to reach new points of the map. It's the breadcrumb system as Ubisoft described it. Follow the breadcrumbs to the new area A to B. A new gameplay mode introduced in Odyssey, though, is Conquest Battles. These battles are unlocked after weakening the region power of an area. You weaken the region power by killing leaders, looting war chests, and burning supplies. These can be found at the different camps and all of the different regions. There are so many ways that you can weaken leader powers. As I stated earlier, the regional powers are Athens and Sparta, but that's the Delian League of Athens and the Peloponnesian League of Sparta. When given the chance, you can either defend the region power you just helped cripple or help enemy invaders. This allows for the game to have continually cycling array of new lieutenants, bases, and ultimately location objectives and missions to keep players returning to the game. While it is an awesome new mechanic, the first time you experience it, it falls to repetition and leads me to believing I'll never go back after disrupting power and committing to the vicious circle of rise and fall of the powers. It echoes the sentiment being reinforced in the story's overarching narrative about the fluctuation of power, but doesn't do anything to actually deepen that relation. It only fills the space. And that's kind of what I was addressing earlier, is it makes your decision making seem almost unimportant. You make decisions, you kill certain people, and then all of a sudden you can just defend that group that you just crippled. And then a new leader comes into power, and then the region bar is completely filled up. So some of the actions that you take in killing some of these people, while it takes away a mission, it doesn't really have a global effect on the game the way that they present that it does. I think one of the biggest features to note beyond traversal is the reformat of assassination and combat as a whole for Odyssey. Following in Origin's footsteps, combat has been reworked to be an element of gameplay, a direct element of gameplay, an approach players can take right away. Where, as in Assassin's Creed history, combat was typically viewed as a secondary or almost even punishment in the game world as a result of failed stealth and assassination attempts. So if assassination and stealth is what led you to Odyssey, you won't be sad because it still exists, but it's buried under the three-pronged skill tree and redefined combat elements. That's the thing that the game just in your face, play combat. Take for example the weaponry. The arsenal for Alexios and Cassandra is as vast as ever, offering different variations in staffs, polearms, spears, heavy-bladed weapons, and then pockets of those weapons such as tridents in the spear class. Then given a bow as well, these attributes define two of the three trees, the hunter and the warrior skill tree, and they honestly demand the attention of the player, and they almost downright shadow the title of the game and the basis of what fans fell in love with, the assassin tree. While the combat is a breath of life in the stale and repetitive combat scenarios of the series as a whole, the attempts to emulate From Software's Soul series combat, peppered in with a little CD Projekt Red's The Witcher 3, it fails to match the precision available in the games it draws inspiration from, and it just seems like it was a rushed mechanic to a game that's supposed to be about stealth. And just a quick personal gripe, how is it that precision techniques like parry was mapped to 2 separate buttons being pressed simultaneously? It caused for extreme frustration and oftentimes infuriating deaths or near death because of miscalculation or lack of execution in its entirety. However, with this newly defined combat, weapon, and armor system, upgrading and engraving are an absolute requirement to being successful in whatever gameplay mode you choose. Upgrading is as simple as it sounds. Like a level 15 leg armor piece you have, use enough crafting materials to upgrade it to your current level, increasing DPS and the great engravings already present on the gear. Engraving is like your 7th layer in a 7-layer dip. It allows you to take the awesome base stats of a piece gear and customize it with stats you enjoy, such as an increase to assassin's damage, increased burn rate, headshot damage, etc. As I stated, buried deep under these mechanics is the assassination aspect of the game that at times, even though it's there, it falls flat and incredibly repetitive, but using engravings and upgrades can improve this. The Spear of Leonidas allows for a dramatic and quick stealth approach, but leaves you vulnerable without specific techniques like the Hero Strike. All in all, the stealth has improved from Origin, but falls even further in the shadows of this once stealth-based game. Now that we've addressed the story synopsis, story verdict, and gameplay, we're going to dive into one of my favorite aspects of gaming, and one of the things that we do most prominently here on the channel is talk about graphics and music. In my opinion, a strong musical score makes a great game even better. Odyssey is no exception to this. Scored by The Flight and Mike Geogiadis, sorry for the butchery. The main score to the game is one that reflects the temperamental tone of the narrative and fluctuates to the beat of the experience, more so than the writing sometimes. The main theme, Flight of the Eagle Bearer, is epic and brings to mind all great Greek films and games I've experienced while remaining unique and distinguishable from the crowds of titles. The tracks, all available on Spotify, go check it out, have such an emotional range, achieving somber tones and melancholy ambience while also capturing the stress and intensities of scenarios such as encountering the Medusa or fighting Deimos. What's even more awesome is that many of the tracks have English and Greek versions that play variously throughout the main Odyssey. Even more impressive and exciting, as I mentioned earlier, the shanties made a return with naval combat, and they are exquisite. Performed by a wide array of choirs, the numbers are unique and often reflect the tone of the narrative progression, such as if the seas are troubled, or you move into a region where the enemies are powerful for you. The shanties seem to reflect that nature, but you can obviously change them to any ones you want. Personally, Poseidon, God of the Sea, and the Tale of Leonidas have to be my favorite to barrel into combat with. In line with the music, the sound profiles in this game are absolutely superb. As you stroll from different block types, whether it's marble or granite to cement to ground, roofs, mud, pavement, etc. Each of these sound profiles are unique as you go over them, and that's just running over things, not considering all the animals and all of the different noises that you actually experience in this game. They complement the extraordinary soundtrack and help bring the atmosphere of this game to life, and support the rich detail of every building and mountain. One thing that thrilled me was when I was swimming in the ocean trying to clear a shipwreck, when a whale swam by me. It was not only gorgeous to look at, but the whale started signaling and then singing. It was an awesome audio and aesthetic touch that I think a lot of people will go without seeing in this game. Graphically speaking, this game is superb, especially considering its size. From time to time, you see a little repetition in the fresco and relief adoration in temples and buildings, but it helps establish a recognizable iconography within the game without requiring an art historian's background to appreciate the depths in decoration. That's not to say, though, that each temple to Zeus or Poseidon in different regions doesn't differ drastically. Placement of imagery is sometimes just as important as the image itself, and the temples remain distinct while having strong continuity. I think it's important to note, though, that in creating a continuity between architectural and artistic representations in the game, they unfortunately missed out on a lot of opportunities to show artistic depth. One specific example of this would be the game's tombs. Whether I found myself in the tomb of the Forgotten Hero or Agamemnon's tomb, there was little artistic diversity and would be really hard to distinguish each without the HUD telling me I was there. Again, it's not without saying that there absolutely is no diversity in the tombs. There are some statues, jewelries on chests, some different adoration, and some even had more in-depth puzzles than others. Overall, though, the color palette, the frescoes, the floor tilings, the walls, they changed very little, making me have to look and think really hard about the differences and affirming that I was in a different temple. It's not something I'm criticizing the game for, it's just something to consider when analyzing the diversity in the other megastructures of the game, especially when you look at Sparta and Athens and how they depict the stark duality between the cultures, and also addressing the overall theme of duality in Odyssey. Sparta is very natural and minimalist. There are shops, temples, docks, and training grounds. In Sparta, there is war, and everything else is a matter of the gods. This is the complete antithesis to the sprawling streets of Athens. It's a representation of philosophy and the branches of democracy, rich and poor. It is the duality in the micro juxtaposed to the macro of the game's narrative, and Athens was rendered extraordinarily. Ubisoft handles the constructions incredibly well, and each has the level of detail you can imagine from a warrior society versus a society of grandiose thinking and luxury. The use of different Greek art practices ranging from bronze and copper sculptures and relief to bust making to stele and detailed fresco show that the development team did their homework on their historical subject matter, and it was rendered immaculately. Every texture map present in the game really brings value to the world, giving depth when needed, such as character models, mountains, quarries, ocean floors, etc. You may think, well, that's what they're there for. Yes, you are right, that is what texture maps are for, but there's a natural flow of Odyssey's environmental maps. There's a separation of visual elements such as basic environments. I didn't feel that the mountains of sand blended in with the quarry of marble, and certain mountain ranges were different colors, had deeper cracks. They were noticeably different on different islands. Even the ocean water on volcanic islands changed color with the abundance of sulfur as you approached it. The visual fidelity in the game is superb. One aspect I could not get over in my Let's Play series was the lighting. Not only were the volumetrics stupendous, they danced harmoniously with the maps, reflecting smooth and coarse surfaces as needed. The standout here, in my opinion, was the spectral maps that were placed on the ocean because the light rays just hit it and just bounced perfectly. When you would crash into a swell day or night, the water just looked absolutely phenomenal. It has this glittering effect that shocked me. It was near hyper-real. The level of graphical achievement in this game had me stopping and exploring for hours, seeing the intricacies of the NPCs, main characters, buildings, all the way down to the columns. This game is beautiful to look at and rewarding to players who take the time to admire it. It isn't without saying, though, that there are some problems in a game this large. There were numerous render problems, game crashes, and massive amounts of pop-up. In a gaming landscape that we move further and further away from pop-up because of render techniques, etc., etc., it was something that didn't surprise me, but I also didn't expect it. In conclusion, though, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is overall a great game. That honestly surprised me, to say at the end of all of this. The big question remains, though, is it a good Assassin's Creed game? This title has leaps and bounds of improvements from its predecessor Origins. The focus on combat-driven gameplay is a divisive tactic introduced a year ago and has polarized fans of the series. Looking to reacquaint the series with stealth, Odyssey comes closer to delivering the stealth RPG we always wanted from an Assassin's Creed game. However, the stealth falls flat in many circumstances and offers little reward to being stealthy versus being a violent brute, hacking and slashing every enemy in every base. The narrative in Odyssey brings us closer to understanding the mysterious Isu origins and further expands the groundwork of Layla's story presented in Origins. However, the narrative suffers at certain turns both between length of campaign and as the game's inherent duality seems at conflict with the gameplay and characters' decision making. Ultimately, the environment, visuals, music, and overall experience shadow the negative of this game and make this one I wanted to come back to night after night. If not to explore the world of the Assassin's Legacy, to explore the rich and vibrant Greek world created by the dedicated teams of Ubisoft. My ultimate verdict is, you should play this game if you loved Origins and wanted to expand that gameplay field, and you should also play it if you're like me, someone who skipped most of Origins. This is an excellent open-world third-person action-adventure game, but a subpar Assassin's Creed game. Thank you so much for everybody who stuck with us through the length of this review. I promise I will always deliver reviews of this length, some a little shorter, some a little longer, because you all deserve to get a deep discussion with games, not a 5-minute mega review that I honestly don't even understand how with a game this large is even possible to get something under 10 minutes. I mean, my synopsis of the game was very long, and that was after multiple iterations of trying it. But again, if you like what we're doing on this channel, please subscribe, please show us some love, help me get some traction so we can continue doing what we love to do and continue creating a awesome dialogue about the artistic representation in games.